Steve Moran here with Senior Housing Forum, and I am talking to Dan Hutson in this episode of the Senior Housing Forum podcast, and we're at the Senior Living Innovation Forum in Napa. You can see with the bottles back there, and he's got his name tag on, which if I'd done a really good job, I would have asked you to take it off, but since it's on, we'll just leave it there. No, you can leave it now. Okay. It's already there. It's too late. Okay. There's so many things I could talk to you about. I mean, you did a great presentation yesterday with Trish on
innovation and design thinking.
Design thinking is the term I was looking for. But in the past, you and I have talked a little bit about, and you've talked a little bit about brand alignment with culture. And I'd just like to have you kind of expound a little bit about what your thinking is on that and what that might look like and what the disconnect is today.
Sure. So, you know, what's interesting is, you know, typically company brand is really owned by marketing, and culture is frequently owned by HR or owned by some aspect of operations, when in fact, if you think about it, brand is simply the outward manifestation of who you are or who you say you are, who you aspire to be, and culture is who you really are. And to be really successful as an organization, you really need to have alignment between who you say you are and who you actually are. Because increasingly, people really recognize inauthenticity. They recognize when a company is being disingenuous. They want to be part of your story. They want to be part of your mission if that resonates with them. But if what they see outwardly presented is radically different from what they experience on the inside, that's a big turnoff. You know, you look at what Wells Fargo has been through. You look at what Volkswagen went through. You know, on the outside, these are companies that seem to be highly respectful of their customer, but then you find out that they are, in fact, doing some very disreputable things to their customer. So you really do need to make sure that your brand or your outward manifestation is in close alignment with how you actually behave, how you think, what you believe.
So where do you start? So you start with saying, here's my culture and I'm going to tell my story, except that it's not very good? Or, you know, I mean, I think the question really is just how do you make that happen?
So, you know, I'll say for Human Good was the result of an affiliation between two like-minded nonprofit senior living organizations, similar missions, similar products, but some cultural differences, definitely some cultural differences. And so in the affiliation planning process and the strategic planning process, you know, we identified what's our aspiration, what's our big aspiration for this company. And that aspiration is really around how do we act as a platform? How do we provide opportunities for the people we serve to live rich, purposeful, engaged, meaningful lives? Because, you know, the research that we've done, you know, you can talk to people. It's a unique idea, but talk to people. It is a unique idea. It is. Yeah. You know, talk to your customer, right. Talk to your prospective customer, talk to the people who rejected you and find out, you know, why they rejected you. But if you talk to the people you want to serve and you develop that deeper understanding of what they're looking for, and you do the literature review, there's a ton of research out there, and what it says is people want to be useful, they want to remain purposeful, they want to be engaged, you know, they want their lives to have meaning in the lives of others, they want to continue to grow and learn and develop both intellectually and spiritually, and they want a sense of fulfillment. They want a sense that the lives that they're living mean something, both to themselves and more importantly to others, that people wouldn't just miss them if they were gone, but that there would be a true tangible gap when they're gone. That's what we all want. We want to feel like people would miss us when we're gone because we added value in their lives, right? So that's the brand aspiration. Now, what does it mean to actually live that? Well, I think one of the most important things is we've got to figure out, how do we create that also for our team members? How do you expect people to deliver that kind of experience if you are not trying to create it for your team members? You know, there's a study, it's been probably several months now, study of Disneyland workers, right? And found that, you know, here are the people who are creating the happiest place on earth, and they are barely making a living wage or not making a living wage. They are living in their cars because they can't afford to live in Anaheim. They have horrendous commutes. They're working 2 and 3 jobs, and yet these are the people who are supposed to make us oh so happy when we visit Disneyland. And this is not a knock on Disneyland. Disneyland does a lot of amazing things. They are a master of brand. But it does, as with Wells Fargo, Volkswagen, others, it does show that dark side of a misalignment of company culture with brand. We really focus on trying to be as transparent as possible, and I can tell you that it's a lot easier being a transparent, honest, authentic company when you are at least striving to be what you present yourself to be. Otherwise, you know, it's like your mother always said, you know, it's a lot easier to tell the truth than to lie, because then you don't have to worry about who you told what story to.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. So it sounds like what you're saying is you start by saying, this is what we aspire to be. You have some transparency about, here's where we are, even though this is where we want to be, so this is where we're trying to go.
Yeah, it's a journey.
And then once so are you transparent both internally and externally?
We try to be. You know, certainly, you know, people would and should call us out when we're not being transparent, when we're not being honest. I mean, that's the kind of culture that we encourage. And I think our CEO in particular, I think is really good about acknowledging, you know, where we don't quite reach our aspiration. You know, the thing about aspiration is it means we aspire to get there. It doesn't mean we're there, right? So, you know, we are aspiring to reach a level where we're not just providing a purposeful, engaged life for our residents, but that we're also providing that for our team members.
Well, that's just where I was going to go next, was that when you talk about your aspirations, you really have aspirational goals for 2 different groups, right? Or maybe 3. So you've got your residents and your team members, and maybe for families.
And you have
right?
your family members, and you have other stakeholders. You have the partners that you work with, the vendors, your strategic partners. You know, you want to attract a certain class of partner. A lot of that depends on not just the brand you put out there, but how you actually behave in relationship to those partners. So if I'm seeking to partner with a higher class of strategic partner, I have to behave in a certain way, right? So it's not about just your customer, it's about all your stakeholders. You've got a universe of stakeholders that you serve, that you do business with, and you need to be brand and culture aligned with all those stakeholder groups.
So a lot of this sounds like it's about how you think about stuff as opposed to what you do. Is that fair?
I would say it's about what you believe, what you value, how you act on those beliefs and values.
So one of the things I see in the industry, and I'm not talking about your organization at all, so I want to preface it by that, right? But one of the things I see a lot in the senior living industry is organizations who say, this is who we are, or at least this is who we aspire to be. But when you actually look at how they live their life, there's, you know, the alignment is purely coincidental. And so how do you I mean, I guess the first question is how do organizations become self-aware about that?
You know, I think one of the ways that we became self-aware about that was that 9 years ago we had a CEO change. The previous CEO had retired. John Cochran came on board as our new CEO, and for the last 9 years. I've been with the company 10 years, but for the last 9 years, we've been on this journey, right? In really defining, first it was B Group, this idea of we want to support people in being who they want to be. Human good is really a natural extension of that. They're very much in line. So, this idea of, we're not a place that simply provides comfort and care and security. Those are important. Those are table stakes to being in the business. But that's not how people want to define their lives. That's important to them, but that's not how they want to live their lives. Just as people don't define themselves by their health condition. I don't come up to you and introduce myself as, hi, I'm Dan, I'm type 2 diabetes. By the way, I'm not type 2 diabetes. But we don't introduce ourselves in terms of our chronic health conditions. We introduce ourselves as, I'm a writer, I like to travel, I'm married, I've got 2 daughters. That's how we define ourselves. This is what I do for a living. That's who we are. And so frequently in this business, we kind of ask people to redefine themselves on the basis of their health status. We need to create environments in which people are able to explore, who they are and flourish in their identity, not in terms of, these are my limitations, these are my health conditions, but more about, this is who I am, this is what I aspire to still do. Remember, we're living longer, we're living an additional 10, 20, 30 years, and it's a period of time that has not been well defined by us or by society. And so we have this opportunity to really redefine what this stage of life looks like. Our industry has this opportunity, right? Redefine what this stage of life is all about. And it should not be about managing people's care. That should not be the definition of this third stage of life. This third stage of life should really be about, I worked all my life, I had a profession, I had a family, I had successes, I had failures. They all brought me to this point, and now is my reward. I'm going to spend the next 10, 20, 30 years becoming the person I've always wanted to be. I want to build on everything that came before, and I want to capitalize on that. My biggest aspiration for our business would be that when someone reaches the end and they're celestially discharging out of our community, that they would tell me that I've had a great life, I had a family, a career, I've done all these wonderful things, but the time that I've spent in this community, that time is about the most profoundly affecting, the most important and meaningful time of my life. That, to me, is an aspiration we should all be reaching for.
So I really like that. So a couple of years ago, I was offered the use of a timeshare up at Squaw Valley here in the Tahoe area. It was before the ski season. It was kind of the lowest of the low season. And I went up there to work and write for a couple of days. And it was a very hard time for me because, I don't know that you know this, most people wouldn't know this, but I used to be a volunteer ski patroller. Mm-hmm. And so I'd put on the really cool red vest with a white cross on it, and I could put you in a toboggan on the steepest slope, and I could load you up and I could safely take you down. But now I've got blood clots, and so I'm taking anticoagulant medication, which means that if I hit a tree, I'd probably die. And so it's probably the end of my life of ever skiing again. And I sat there and I'd look up these ski runs and the bear hills. I thought, man, I'm never going to do that again. And it was really hard. But I think so I think what you're saying is we have this great opportunity to take people who have these limitations. And so what do I do now? So I go take my dog and I go out on a hike and I do other things. And I think and I'm pretty good about that, and part of it's probably my age, and part of it's personality. And so I think this is the great opportunity to help people do that.
Let me ask you a question, Steve. When did you start Senior Housing Forum?
7 years ago.
7 years ago.
Yeah.
So before that, you had a life you were very proud of. You did amazing things that were very meaningful and purposeful. And for the last 7 years, you've been establishing yourself as a voice in this industry, which didn't exist beforehand. Right?
That's right.
So you're on a different journey. You're on a different adventure now. And it's different from what it was,
Right.
but that makes it no less meaningful, no less pleasurable than what you did before.
Well, that's a great example because I think that you almost didn't describe it well enough, because I would tell you that it's the best journey I've ever had in my whole life.
There you go.
That this is the best job I've had. I get to do this all day long with people and have amazing conversations and know that I'm actually impacting, really I'm impacting tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people's lives as we make this difference. And so I think we have this very unique opportunity that you've described to be able to do that for our residents and really for our team members. So,
Yeah.
Any last words?
Just, whatever your aspiration is, for serving people, be brave, be ambitious, don't be scared. I mean, we just went to a session where people talked about disruption. Disruption is coming to this industry, and you can either choose to disrupt yourself or you can cower in fear waiting for someone to disrupt you. And I choose to disrupt. I don't choose to be disrupted.
Yeah. Well, and I would just sort of close by saying that I love disruption because I think disruption is always opportunity. So Dan, thank you very much.
You bet.
Thank you for listening to this podcast or watching it if you're watching it on video. If you have an idea or you think you have a story that we ought to be telling, I'd love to hear from you. Steve Moran, smoran@seniorhousingforum.net. Thank you very much.
You bet.